All right. Good evening, everybody. Dave, can you hear me? We are good. We good, Dave? That doesn't sound right. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. If you can hear me, folks, please put in the chat that you can hear me. Oh, okay. All right, Dave, can you hear me? All right. All right, Dave, you should be good now.
You know?
All right, that's our show tonight, folks. We'll see you next week.
I feel, and we're going to talk about this tonight. I feel sort of like, I guess, for the first time in my life, like Ron DeSantis. You know, I'm ready to comment on some things, and you're Elon Musk and don't know what the fuck you're doing on Twitter or where you're going. So
well, this is
kind of no. I'm going to speak now. You be quiet, ladies and gentlemen. Brian is to technology what a diseased yak is to the animal kingdom. That's the best way I could describe it. He never gets anything right. I have to, I have to fix it on my end just to try to get into the show. Hey, Brian, what's up?
What's up? Well, as I've found out over the last week, the most important part of the video is the first 4 minutes, and apparently we've outrun our stay. So we'll see everybody next week. No, it's Dave. Everything's fine. It's just, and our numbers have been real good. Two weeks ago, we had close to 1,000 views.
Before you get too cocky about our numbers have been good, your voice is breaking.
Breaking.
Yeah, like you're too close to the mic. You're not, but that's what I'm saying. It's not.
All
It's
right.
not. It's not intermittent. It's just got a, you know.
Is that happening out there in the audience?
I'm.
If it
That's what
is,
I'm. That's what I'm hearing on my end.
still?
Well, you're not talking now, so that's
All right. Well, still, is it still breaking up?
still.
All
It's.
right.
I don't want to use that term as breaking up, but it's like rolling, if you will.
All right. Well,
Worse.
how how's this? How do you like that? Does that sound better?
Um, no, not really.
Really? Because I have it going straight through the microphone, and
I
here's
know.
through Ecamm. Ladies and gentlemen out there, are you hearing me clearly, or is Dave correct and it's breaking
Well, of
up all
course
over the
I'm.
place?
Of course I'm correct. Again, the term is not breaking up; it's rolling.
Rolling. All right. I don't know all that mumbo jumbo, but
Well, obviously, I'm surprised you can push a
yeah.
button. Maybe you
All right.
can't. Maybe that's what's happening here.
Look, I'm doing everything the same. You know that technology is just so finicky. We'll get through it.
Right, right, Elon.
Well, first of all, I need some help from the audience. If you are viewing this, and by the way, if you can hear me clearly, this is Divided We Stand. It's Saturday night, what, the 27th of May. This is our, sounds fine, he said. Oh, geez. This is our 171st show. We are one short of tying the Head in the Box record of 172 shows. So next week will be the tying show in terms of what I had done with the Head in the Box. So we're moving on here, folks. We're really moving on.
Wouldn't it be better if you really, for this show, actually did put your head in a
In the
box?
box.
Wouldn't that be better? I mean,
It's-
literally.
This is
Put
turning
your
out
head
to
in
be
a box.
a
I mean, my
comedy
God.
routine. Okay.
You know,
Well, it actually isn't a box. If you look at this, it's a rectangle, right? Something
Yeah,
like
but
that.
you can still see your head. In a real box, they couldn't see your head.
Right. Right. Well, anyway, everybody says the sound's good, Dave. So just trust me, the sound is good. It's fine, and everything's dandy. Okay. Now, everything's not dandy outside of the show tonight, but we want to thank everybody for showing up. And if you're new to this and you've just gotten through this through the search on YouTube, we would appreciate if you would subscribe to this channel, which is called Divided We Stand. We do not monetize. You will not see us begging for money or this or that. We simply are here to get the message out, commiserate, and exchange ideas. That is Divided We Stand. We also operate under the premise that we cannot negotiate with the Republican Party right now. It's impossible because they are intransigent. And if you are a Republican watching, that's fine. We appreciate the other side. Sometimes it's nice to get some type of communication. On the other hand, we are divided, and we know that. You know that, and we know that. Yes?
How many shows, Brian, did you say this makes?
This is 171.
And I missed almost a year of them almost.
You
so I've been
probably
around
missed around 30 some shows.
maybe some, right, quite a few. But so I can't speak to those 30 or 40 that I missed. But from all the ones I've been on, it's interesting you say about that. We've actually had a discussion with one Republican that I know of in
I
all
think
the
so.
time I've been
You're
on.
right.
That's it.
One time.
And so obviously they're not listening to us, and that's fine. I mean, who really cares? Because as you said, and I think most of our audience who tunes in would agree, there's really, it's there's really no purpose in it right now. Really, what it comes down to is either they're going to win and have their America, or they're going to win, or we're going to win and have our America, or each state that's going to fall, and then almost to each county. I find it interesting. I mean, people don't know you and I share a county. At one point, I lived there for 59 years, and you've lived there for probably 20 now almost. And it's named Cumberland County, and it's in South Jersey. And once upon a time, back in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, there was a series of race riots there.
Mm.
And one of the liberal women, whose husband actually happened to be a history teacher, but she was leading kind of the fight for the liberals. She was quoted in the Philadelphia Inquirer as saying, with Bridgeton, you could move Bridgeton right into the heart of Mississippi and nobody would suffer except the people of Mississippi. So Cumberland County has a long history of being somewhat racist. The Klan has developed at least 3 times there that we know of. Had a resurgence. Last big resurgence was actually in the 80s. But my point is, then for a while, because of the demographics, because of the high minority population and the high Latino population, it became Democratic in the county. But now
Right. Things have really changed.
now that county is 7-2, I believe, 5-2. I'm sorry, 7 members, 5-2. And I was talking to someone there who's active in politics, and they said they would not be surprised if in this next election it'll be 7-0 Republican. So the point
Oh,
that I want to
really?
make with that, the point I want to make with that is, it will be a county probably somewhere between Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, and probably not John Kasich.
As a county, though, you have to admit, Bridgeton is just kind of like all the colors. It's just amazing.
And Bridgeton will be a Democratic city for the foreseeable future because of its minority population. But Bridgeton can't carry the surrounding rural townships. Right. And that's really, we talk about it on the show, but I mean, it's really getting more prevalent almost week by week, literally, the two Americas. You have an educated America versus a non-educated America. And a non-educated America that resents the educated America and feels that actually education is a bad thing. That's going on. You have rural versus urban, which again is Cumberland County. The surrounding townships are rural. And so therefore they can undo the numbers of the cities. So each election is important no matter how you look at it. Obviously, the biggest focus is on a presidential race, which is coming up in a year, right? 2024. But every race is important. And I think the message that I want to continue to get out is this is getting worse in terms of the division. But not only is it getting worse in terms of the division, it's getting worse if you really believe, as you should, that we should follow the Constitution, that we should have a Supreme Court that is apolitical, if you believe we should have a Congress that can somehow work together and not threaten. I really don't want to talk about the debt ceiling tonight unless we have to. Basically, it's the June 5th. Let's just find out what happens. But here's the bottom line. Republicans, and it's not even all the Republicans, although all the Republicans are sheep and following them in Congress, they're willing to play Russian roulette with the most vulnerable of America's population. Who will suffer first? As always, the poor and then the middle class, right? So one instance of that is Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. Nobody's saying the senators' salaries will go anywhere. They'll be paid.
Right.
And so will the congressmen. So I'm just dumbfounded sometimes when I think of how can a minority person, and by minority, even if you're in a majority, there may well be more women in America today than men, right? Because men die earlier and the baby boomers are around. But still, women are treated as a minority oftentimes and as second-class citizens. So if you're a woman, if you're a black, if you're a Latino, if you're gay, you have a right to make up your own mind and do whatever you want. However, I would urge you, if you are in that group, to really look at what the Republican Party is proposing for you and your people. And I'll talk a little bit later tonight on Florida and actually some actions that's going on down there in relationship to that.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you, Dave. And we have dedicated, I think the previous 2 shows, we talked about the debt crisis ad infinitum. Not that it would be boring, but, we have pretty much defined where that thing's going. And as you correctly said, the Republicans really, they don't care what happens because they know who's going to get hurt by the debt crisis, and they're willing to go all the way on that. So there's no need to really go into that.
And there was a great article. I think I'm going to wait till next week to discuss it. It was kind of going in depth. We've also talked a lot about the media and their role, and we'll talk again tonight. I want to talk a little bit about Elon Musk and Twitter and Ron DeSantis and what all that means. But I think this article made the point that the media is treating this as 2 equals responsible for this. And that's not true. They will point out that is not true. It is a Republican-caused crisis and basically driven by 30 congressmen who are the ultra uber right. That we can name the names: Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, your buddy Gosar. I mean, the list goes on. They're the prominent names, but there's about 30 of them, maybe 35, that are doing this, and Republicans are falling in line, even if they see that this is not a good idea. And as you point out, the only thing I do want to say, Brian, and you pointed it out so well, this is not imaginary debt. This is money we've already spent. Right. So it's basically, in essence, it would be like, you took out a $300 loan, and it's time to pay it back. You say to the bank, "Fuck you, I'm not paying it back." That's really what these people are saying.
And Trump spent a quarter of all of that debt. That's the
correct.
Thing.
Correct. Well, that would never enter into it. And my concern, is that, again, with the media treating this as kind of an equal two sides, that I think they have an obligation. And I will point out something, and this is again post Trump, very much so. At the time Trump was in office, when he got elected, I mentioned this before, we were in Atlanta, and I was stunned. I was living in Atlanta, and even though I was in the heart of Dixie there, I didn't really see Hillary Clinton losing. I come back to Washington, D.C., we moved back, and at that point I became a guide at the Museum of News on Pennsylvania Avenue, which no longer exists, closed its doors. Actually closed its doors in December before the pandemic hit in March, and was sold to Johns Hopkins. But we would get into raging debates there because of Trump, and there were a number of us we were almost all ex-journalists of all the media. We had print, we had radio, we had TV. Almost all the guys came from that field. And we got in some pitch battles with the management about, we need to talk about Trump and evil and Republican. But again, we talked about it last show, and we talked about it on our special show, this idea of neutrality, journalistic neutrality. I don't see that as being a good thing right now. Now, because certainly the right wing, which would be, have control of Fox, have control of AON, have control of Newsmax, and now, as I'll go into some depth later, have all control of Twitter. And we have CNN obviously leading toward thinking they have a need to somehow attract this conservative side. And I hate to even use the word conservative, because conservatives aren't bad. They're not. Radical Republicans is the best I can say. They are bad. CNN coming along and, let's play footsies with Donald Trump. And of course, they took their lumps. But my point is that those of us we just can't be quiet. We shouldn't be quiet. We should take on as much as we can take on. For example, Brian, you're a teacher, so and you can't really go in and proselytize about the virtues of liberalism and attack Republicans. So certain jobs, certain positions preclude that, but we still have a right outside to do that. So I would urge everybody, if you do one thing, try to get active, and there's many ways to do that. You can have a voice. You can send money. You can run for office. I mean, all those things are still available to us. And I look at this and I see the trends. I mean, think, Brian, okay? You really just have the two coasts of the big cities for liberals. You really don't find them in the rural areas. You don't find them in the South, except in the big cities. You certainly don't find them now in the far West. The Southwest is still kind of open territory, right now, maybe leaning Democratic, but not really solid, necessarily. Could be case by case or district by district. So yeah, so it's real, and I don't see it getting better between now and 2024. I just don't. I see it getting worse.
Okay. On that happy note, let's go to another one. Actually, it's actually not that funny. Today's title, as it suggests, is about sexual abuse in the church, but it's more than that. I didn't want to have a very long title, so you'll forgive me, folks. We know some of the issues that Republicans are bringing up within the last month or two. Actually, probably longer than that. Basically, they see us as the woke generation or the woke group. And as Dave has brought up the last couple of shows, they're trying to ban books. They're trying to ban abortion. There's just a litany of things that they want to ban because they consider it to be, for want of a better expression, godless, the woke community. And we know that ever since Ronald Reagan made ties with Jerry Falwell on the right, that the Republican Party has aligned itself with the religious right to gain votes. They knew back then that they needed those extra 10 million votes or whatever it was. They needed everything they could because they couldn't deal with the African American vote, the minority vote in general. So there was a dilemma for the Republican Party. We all know that they were losing the vote, basically. And if you look at the last 20 some years, they've been losing the votes, for the exception of the 2004 with Bush and Kerry. The Democrats have won the vote. So the ties with religion has been really, really strong. And I find it very peculiar that, we continually see stories of sexual abuse, whether it's through the Catholic Church, whether it's through, the Protestant churches per se, the pastors, to a lesser degree in the synagogues, but that's only because there aren't as many Jews, obviously. Who knows what's going on there? But they've been given a pass. You don't see the righteous indignation against religions. It's like you don't touch that. And recently, in the last couple of weeks, we've seen some pastors arrested. I'll be showing you some articles, pictures about this. But more than just the fact, when we know that this kind of thing's been happening in the Catholic Church, we know that pastors have done these kind of things. But again, the cricket's coming from the Republican Party. And it shows you the hypocrisy within the party, because they, for example, as you know, Dave, they are strictly against abortion, but they seem to give this other thing a pass, and yet, they don't call out God for miscarriages, do they? I mean, that's something that happens all the time. But, I know I'm getting a little bit facetious there, but it just tends to show me how the incredulity of these people. I mean, it's something that I've had a tough time coming to grips with. These people of love, there is no love. This is a political power play. And again, I mean, I don't even know how to address this tonight, other than show you some of these articles. And sure, Dave, go ahead.
Maybe a good place to start. An atheist friend of mine goes a little bit far, but the way he says it, he says, the difference between Protestants and Catholics: Protestant pastors fuck the wives of their congregation. Catholic priests prey on the little boys, the altar boys who are there. Now, of course, that's a blanket indictment of all of that. But what is interesting is that, in general, I think people would agree with me, in general, religion takes a dim view of sex. Right?
We'll come back to that, Dave. You keep going, Dave.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, so you have, the Boston scandal, a few years ago, made into the movie. I can't remember the name now, Spot, whatever it was. And the documented cases, there was just another one came out, another state, maybe Illinois. I'm not really sure. If anybody knows out there, please give me those figures. The number was pretty astounding. It was like 30 years. How many? This was a Catholic church with which the focus is on. Now, the Catholic Church, pretty much. Now think about this, Brian. I'm going out here on a limb here, but think about this. You don't hear as much about the politics of the Catholic Church as you do about the dictates of the Pope. Would you agree with that? I mean, the Catholic Church really is run supposedly by the Pope, who is, God's infallible messenger here on earth. So they do take a stand on abortion, some other things, but they're not really political necessarily so much. You really have these new mega churches in the South and growing in the Midwest where, they think you've got the end of timers A lot of churches are, the apocalypse and, it's coming, and they actually would welcome it in some ways. They're almost like doomsday preppers. A lot of them, they go to church on Sunday to pray for the apocalypse because they're going to be prepared. That's Idaho, Montana, places like that. Now, the basis, and then we'll get to your clip there, but one of the basis, I think, of democracy, one of the things you have to do, you have to have a separation from church and state. If you do not, you have a theocracy. And a theocracy cannot be a democracy. It can't be. All right. The only way it could be a democracy is if every single person or the majority, and even the majority, you can't do that because theocracy tends to limit and democracy tends to expand. That's a very simplistic definition, but I think it's true. Religion is a very controversial topic. And remember growing up, don't talk politics, religion, or sex at the dinner table. And now the three have become so intertwined, right, that I don't think, and the Supreme Court is going to be absolutely no help.
Right.
My concern is that forget all the misstated facts, like America was founded as a Christian nation. It wasn't. The founding fathers, if anything, were deists for the most part, a few Christians, but not so much. So I think we're headed down a bad road. And tonight you want to look at, which I think is a good thing. For me, for Catholic priests, again, this is just my personal opinion, I think that sex is very much a part of humanity and being human. And there's a couple reasons for sex. One, of course, is to procreate, but the other is just enjoyment. I mean, it's an if you're doing, I used to tell my students, I said, if you're not enjoying it, you're doing it wrong. I mean, that's kind of the way it goes, of course, but out of that comes a lot of problems. So I don't really want the church, I don't think the church should dictate sex because just because of its beliefs. And people will grab a verse out of the Bible and say, this is Sodom and Gomorrah and then sodomite and then gay. No, just stay the fuck out. Stay with the Spirit. That's fine, right? But stay out of politics. And for God's sake, unlike Texas, which is trying to get the 10 Commandments back in to schools, Alabama's looking at that. They have no business being there. None. Absolutely none, zilch, zero. Private school, religious school, do whatever you want. It's a whole different thing. But for public schools, and the really bad thing, Brian, I think is why it's happening now, is we are more religiously diverse than we've ever been in the history of the nation.
Right, and we have a growing non-believing population too.
There are more atheists than there's ever been, according to numbers. More agnostics than there's ever been. Certainly more people of.
And doesn't that say something, Taves, as to why they are probably pushing in the other direction? They see that coming too, in addition to the demographics.
Well, of course. Look, again, another thing I believe, and again, I would debate anyone on this. Authoritarians like authority. That almost sounds kind of sometimes like an oxymoron or just something that shouldn't go together. And that church members, for the most part, have to be respectful of authority. They believe it comes from God or the Pope or their preacher, or wherever. Well, that's fine in your spiritual life. But once you start bringing that authority into the public arena, if you will, into government, that creates a real problem, a very real problem. And we are there. So, Brian, show us a couple clips.
Sure. First of all, I wanted to just show you just some basic clips that I grabbed off of Twitter as far as the actual just visual clips. And then we'll go back in time to Christopher Hitchens, because he always had that warning to us. Like, you'll see always the leadership. This is where you're going to see the sexual abuse, is in the later leadership of the churches. And again, they're going after, the church is always kind of, how can I explain it? The church is always like the uninformed and those who could not defend themselves. Those are the two that they've always centered around. And that's sort of like the practice of the Republican Party. Trump himself said, I like the unintelligent or the stupid or whatever he said. I can't remember exactly. You might remember that, Dave. So it kind of blends itself, this behavior of the Republican Party and the acceptance of this abuse, because they don't really give a shit. Like, they just don't give a shit. Let's go look at this. Just recently, you have a California pastor. Again, this isn't obviously the first, Dave. I'm just bringing things that we've been seeing the last couple of weeks. Okay, and he was sentenced to prison with the rape of 3 children under the age of 14. So, of course, the Republicans are not endorsing this type of behavior, but they're not. They don't bring it up. It's not something. This is 1,000 times worse than, having a book with a transgender, character within the book. But they play this game, this game of the uninformed. That's the way to go. I believe there's another one just recently. If I can get to him. I really shouldn't even have to show you this, but there's another guy here. See if I can think. It doesn't show up in the next couple minutes. I have a page here. All right, I'll just show you this guy here. Okay, he's at a Christian college. He's arrested for letting a spiritual mentor sexually abuse young boys. And, of course, you think it brings to mind Jim Jordan with what went on in the locker room at Ohio State, of just letting this happen. Okay. Now, thankfully, these people are getting caught. But again, this is something
But Brian, I agree they're getting caught, but how many aren't?
Right. That's the key. How many are not getting caught? And you're making a good point there. And that's important. So I wanted to go back to Hitchens. This was at the time when you had you were talking about the Boston sex scandals and things like that. This goes back around 14 years, or maybe a little bit less. But we'll watch a little bit of this clip because I think it's kind of important because, again, it was something that Hitchens always warned against. And we're going to see Mika Brzezinski met 10 years ago. And we'll check this out.
Last week, it appears the current Pope may have known about the recent revelations of abuse of children at the hands of members of the clergy. And my question to you, especially since you've written about this and you say that justice is coming, you're not that much of a fan of a Catholic Church. Do you think we need to be doing something in this country to address this? How do you think this is going to play out?
Well, should we in this country, have you not read what's been happening in Wisconsin?
Yes, I have.
A school for children who can only use sign
Correct.
language. And 200 of them have their childhoods completely wrecked by this priest. And entreaties are addressed to the man who is now Pope, Cardinal Ratzinger, the man who was saying at the time that the only problem with the scandal was there was a press campaign against the church. The abuse was not the problem. The torture, the rape, only the revelation of it.
Christopher,
was the problem. Nothing happens except that he forgives the priest who asks for forgiveness before he dies.
Let me ask you,
this is a scandal.
Well, let me ask you about this. It is a scandal. Let me ask you, if you spend enough time in courtrooms in this country, invariably you see people charged on the edges of a crime with being an accessory, either before or after the fact. And for several years, I've been wondering, in the example of Cardinal Law from Boston, who now has a pretty terrific parish right outside the gates of the Vatican in Rome, why he and why should not the Pope be charged with being an accessory before or after the fact?
Well, you take the wind out of my sails.
Okay, so I'll stop there. We don't have to keep going on. But Hitchens makes the point that the Pope at the time, Ratzinger, he was more concerned with forgiving and who is it for him to forgive the abuser before he dies.
Well, look, let me see this. If I could mandate that every student see one episode of a TV show now, I would mandate that they would see the very first episode of the Yellowstone prequel, 1923. And one of the recurring storylines in 1923 is the Native American boarding schools. Again, it's very hard. I mentioned last week, but I just remember that twice in my life, I think I've actually wanted to just kill somebody for no reason, or because of what they were. Or felt I could do that, or wanted to do it. Shouldn't say I would do it, but wanted to. One was in 1969 when I saw Easy Rider, and it's ending. Right. I just want to go out and find some rednecks and blow them up. And I didn't. And watching 1923, I wanted to go out and find some priests and blow them up. Now, it would be one thing if it was over, right?
Right.
But it isn't. Slavery, we could argue theoretically, economic slavery, white slavery, slave trafficking.
Wage slavery.
Yeah. But actually, slavery is a sin of the past. We still suffer from it. We will suffer from it as long as there's the United States. It was just, you can't undo it.
All right, it's indelible.
It's there. It's and the problem becomes, though, with these priests I was looking at. I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. That was 1923, and Native Americans. Does it still go on? And actually, it's gone. It went into the 60s, and that wasn't that long ago. I think again too, and I would respect any Catholic that disagreed with me. I think there are two problems inherent in the Catholic Church immediately. One is the fact of the Pope. A group of cardinals. We know that's political, okay? And they'll say in God's hands. When the gray smoke comes up or whatever comes out of the Vatican. When they get a Pope, really. That makes that man, what, the day before he could have been wrong and the day he's elected, he's infallible? Nah, I don't think so. And then the second thing is, I think the ban on their priests and their nuns, you don't hear as much about sexual abuse in your nuns, but there is in 1923, there is a storyline where that does happen. Again, I think that's unnatural. And I think when what you're seeing is the ramifications of maybe denying sex or dirtying sex or making it something that's ugly. And why can't a priest, a man of God, have sex? Why? I mean, think about it. Could you go? How old are you, Brian, now?
63.
Have you had sex?
Yes.
Okay. Can you imagine your life not having sex? No,
I can't imagine. I can't imagine. I could not. I mean, just from a physical standpoint, I could not. It's tough enough each day. You know what I mean? So, how do you say that? That's an issue.
Of course, what they will say is, well, you serve a higher calling. You serve God. I think if there were a God, I don't think he would have let us, have sex if it was a bad thing, right? So I think that church, again, it was a power control. It's a power struggle. And the two biggest entities doing that are the religious right churches of the South and the Midwest and the Far West and the Catholic Church. And that encompasses a lot of people and a lot of voters. And if you're going to have a separation of church and state, I think the moment that a preacher stands up in the pulpit, or a priest, and takes a political stand, that moment the church should no longer be protected.
And they are beginning to do that the last 4 years.
More and more
last
and
6
more.
Years, yeah.
And I loved the religious rights idea of this one. It was just one idea that they had of Donald Trump. The question becomes, how can a religious person or Christian, I'll say Christian, how can a Christian support Donald Trump, right? Or now you can say, how could they support Ron DeSantis, and the list goes on and on and on. Right. Well, what there was a rationale circulating that really Donald Trump, the religious right, liked him because he would champion their causes, right?
Even though they knew that he was guilty of all the different things.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I mean, you get into that's another thing with sex and politics and government. You have the question: can somebody have sexual problems and be a good legislator or someone? It goes back from beginning to Martin Luther King's a classic example. Martin Luther King was extraordinary womanizer, not as bad as John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy probably was the most flagrant abuser of sex, or the thing was he actually told people, he said, if I don't have sex every day I get a headache. And people don't realize that actually there were two secretaries, female secretaries in the Kennedy administration called Fiddle and Faddle. And if Kennedy could not have a woman, and I don't know how many times that was Jackie, I don't know what that was, but a lot of times it was someone else, that they would actually there to perform that service. Then
And
you
they went
have
obviously they went to their graves. No,
right, and so you have that idea, and then you have like Bill Clinton. Okay, certainly had a womanizing problem, if it's a problem. Again, I think that affairs are only really the business of the trio, the trio involved,
right.
right? The whether it's male, female, whatever. I'm not going to make moral judgments. I don't see why I should. I don't think laws should be made, but certainly, if, certainly that's not beyond the realm of possibility, right? If we see the abortion bans coming, which we see, which are church driven, we see many other things coming church. What if someday they say that adultery is a sin against God, and we kill people, or put them in prison or put them in jail? So I think when you get into regulating people's sex lives, whether they're priests or the common man, I think you're really into an area that you should. Now, having said that, certainly you have laws abusing a minor. I mean, I always find it interesting. Different states have different ages, for statutory rape. Some it's under 18. Some it's 16. In the South, I think it's 9. No, sorry about that, South.
But right, but each state is different with those numbers.
Yeah, and so I mean, you certainly have rules for that. Certainly have rules for rape. Although I would contend, I'm of the school that rape is not a sexual crime; it's a power crime. Yes, sex is involved, but that's not what's really going on there. So nothing. How to say this? Nothing changes in politics, governance overnight. It's a slow process, and that's what concerns me as I begin to see the swing of the religious right taking over more and more and more and more. For example, in Florida, and I'll talk a little bit more at length about Mr. DeSantis in Florida a little later on the show, but they now have a 6-week abortion ban. You cannot have an abortion after 6 weeks.
Right.
Now, I'm not a woman, so I can't really speak to this with personal knowledge, but I've read and I've been told by some women that it is very conceivable that you wouldn't even know you were pregnant 6 weeks in, right? A missed period is what, I mean, it's
right.
Well,
it gets close. You wouldn't know. You wouldn't be sure. It could just be, I'm missing. I'm a little bit late or something like that. Yeah, you wouldn't know.
And now it's opened up a whole, cliched though it is, this Pandora's box. Okay, what if a woman does? And they don't know that. What if a woman? Okay, Alabama, where my granddaughter is, certainly, I hope it doesn't happen, but it would be conceivable that she, before age 18, could get pregnant and decide that it would not be in her best interest, or family discussing it, to have the child. She can't do that in Alabama, right, Anthony? That's what we just said. So. Does she go to another state? Okay. Now some states are saying that if you come back, if they can prove you got an abortion, you're still guilty. They're talking about imprisoning any doctor that performs an abortion. We still don't have a clear. We did have a clear view of abortion with Roe v. Wade, that outlawing abortion was unconstitutional against the law. We now don't have that right now, and certainly. At least the last three justices to go on to the Supreme Court, right, have said that they are opposed to abortion. Well, Alito and your favorite Supreme Court judge, Clarence Thomas, they've got the 5 votes right there.
Right.
They don't need Roberts. And again, you and I argue over this, or we debate it. Your thing is Roberts is a schmuck, and I think that's true.
He is a schmuck. He's a real schmuck.
Yeah, but I think my thing is the only redeeming quality to Roberts is the fact that he is aware it's a Roberts court. So if it was a 4-4, which it was at a point, 4 liberals, 4 conservatives, and Roberts, the tiebreaker, I wouldn't like it. I'd much rather have a 5-4 court. But it's still, I think there are times that he would not want to be labeled as his court did X, right? So now with sex, and it's interesting. I haven't seen any attacks, and everybody out there is listening, or anybody who sees this later, please let us know. I haven't seen much emphasis on pornography. Have you noticed that?
You mean,
I mean,
where the religious right used to always bring that up, and
yeah,
yet now it's not coming up as much?
now, yeah. I mean, now, does that mean, do they think they've conquered pornography?
Well,
Anybody
yeah.
thinks,
Well, I think
eh,
they don't understand the mechanics of it, the numbers that are out there that are watching. It would be you take that away. It's kind of like Putin trying to take away YouTube. I
yeah.
mean, it
Well, I
would
mean, yeah, I was going to say that
anger them.
anybody who thinks pornography is dead can try Pornhub, and that'll sort of disabuse you of that knowledge. And Pornhub is one of the, shall we say, cleaner
Right.
sites. You can certainly go much dirtier than that. But I just find that interesting. I was just thinking about that now. Their focus is on, really, their religious focus right now is on sinners, but not necessarily there. The other thing to remember is, as things are banned, right, or is put down, you make criminals out of those who try to go around the ban. We talk about that with abortion, right? And with book banning, that can also drive sales up. So I'm not saying it's a good thing. The bans are not a good thing, certainly. But according to what I've read over the years, the highest percentage of pornography occurred during the Victorian era, which was the most repressive era in the history of England. We're talking about England now. Well, there was a Victorian America. It really wasn't. The Victorian England was more what we think of. Queen Victoria and her reign, and that kind of thing. And yet we know that it's very hard, I think, with sex and sexuality. It's very hard to legislate it unless it harms another person, right? And my argument would be, with abortion, who does it harm? If it harms anyone, it harms the fetus. All right. But I don't believe that that's something that should enter into it. It would harm the mother and possibly the father, right? And the families. And again, I think with abortion, I just end it the easiest way. It's between a woman, the person who impregnated her, if she wants to do that, but she overrules that, her family, and she indeed can overrule that. And then, of course, the doctor. And, we know, Brian, we're teachers. We know, not individual students, but we know of students who have used abortion as birth control, but not that much, not that often, not as often as it's portrayed. They're just like, it's just not. It's, again, like the welfare queens of the Reagan era, right?
Right.
It's something that sounds good. Oh, this is that, this is this thing. And again, I think, I don't know about you, but I favor teaching sex age appropriate from first grade on, right? Now, I'm not saying a first grader gets the same sexual education as a senior. That's absurd, right? But I think, preparing that, even if it's, something as simple as how babies, where babies come from. I don't know where you start. I'm not a child psychiatrist or a child psychologist or a child scholar. But what we're finding now is that, anything is banned, especially if it deals with any issues of gays, lesbians, trans people, questioning, if they're trying to. And I know from a fact, and I'm sure you've had the same experience too over the years of teaching, that I would talk to my students later when they would come out, or if they came out when they were there. And it was pretty tough. It's still tough. Okay. It's getting better. It's getting a little bit more accepted, or was. And now we've got this crazy political thing from the right that's actually saying, if you are gay, lesbian, trans, anything off the normal heterosexual two gender idea, you're wrong, you're evil, there's something wrong with you. And that's just horrible to me. That's just horrid. The idea of, think about it, Brian. Let's think about it right here. Where is there more chance of a young male being raped by another man? In a bathroom or in the Catholic Church? I know where I'm going to go, numbers wise, right? And yet these are the people who want to dictate the morals? I don't think so.
But they know that. They know that. And again, it gets back to I've been saying what Veg just mentioned. again, because this is not, again, the title would make you think that we're just talking about sexual abuse in the church, but it's really not. It's sexual abuse in the church and how the Republican Party avoids it because it is linked with the church for votes. Just like, for example, that any politician is going to be able to avoid, any senator's son was going to be able to avoid war back in the days of Vietnam or whenever.
Right.
Many, who knows how many abortions Trump's lovers had? Who knows that? And we know that it's replete throughout the Republican Party. So, it's just complete hypocrisy. But again, they do it, and it makes the Republican Party even worse. It makes it even worse because they're doing everything that is illegal and everything that is, I would call, unethical to achieve that end.
Well, they're certainly, they want the power, right? And politics is about power. Let's not kid ourselves, all right? But there's still a question, at least to me, and I think there should be a question to every American. How is that power obtained and how is it used, right? Let's pick up there. Anthony already did this. I want to talk about this right now. If you
Sure.
want, it's one of my topics for tonight. Hold on just a second. And what Anthony just posted, ladies and gentlemen, is something I wanted to talk about tonight. And it involves a poet, a young black poet called Amanda Gorton. And Amanda Gorton rose to fame when her poem was read at the inauguration.
For Biden?
No,
Biden?
For
Obama?
Obama, yeah.
Okay.
And she's now become this. She arguably could be one of the most famous poets currently writing poetry. Poets don't really, we don't get so many poets out there, right? So one woman in Florida complained about Amanda Gorman's poems, right? And it was pulled from the shelves. That's bad enough. One person. But the other thing was, I looked at her form. They actually had it online. She didn't even fill in all the information. There's actually an information form. Why should this book be banned? Now, if one person can get a book banned, boy, are we in trouble.
Right.
There is nothing wrong with having age restrictions on some things, right?
Correct.
Maybe, well, first of all, Lady Chatterley's Lover, which was, horrible when it came out. D.H. Lawrence, it's so mild today. But, maybe you'd want to say that shouldn't be read by a fourth grader. I don't know what fourth grader would try D.H. Lawrence, but
I'm not sure they would understand it anyway.
Yeah, I know.
I've read it, and I don't think they would understand it.
No, but with women, and so of course now we've got the double whammy, which I'm going to lead into in a moment, of which Florida right now. Let me start with this. Every American should watch Florida because Florida is the microcosm of what the Republican Party wants America to be.
Correct.
More so than Texas, more so than Alabama, more so than Mississippi, more so than Idaho, more so than Montana. Why do I say that? Because Florida has the most diverse population of those areas, with possible exception of Texas. But you don't have many.
There's still a lot of Democrats. There's still a lot of Democrats in Florida,
yeah.
too, which means it's a real struggle.
And right now, you wouldn't know that if you look at what's coming out of Texas. And why is that? It's really one man, Ron DeSantis, who this week got back in the news when he decided he would announce his presidency, or his running for president, on the Twitter platform. And when it got on there, an estimated 600,000 people tuned in. If I don't know if you really tune into Twitter, but and the platform couldn't hold it, and it crashed, for 20 minutes. And then when they finally did, get it working, sort of like tonight's show, we had some problems in the beginning, which does happen. I mean, I'm not faulting it, but Twitter, it shouldn't happen. All right. I mean, they're arguably, they're certainly in the top 5 social platforms.
And he's the richest man in the world, so you would think.
Well, Elon was, and Elon. What's so interesting about that, or what's bad is, certainly we now know, and it wasn't any secret before. Twitter is going to be the platform. Is trying to be the platform of the conservatives. Elon Musk, who, interesting enough, voted, says he probably did, voted for Obama and Biden, both. He now has changed and is moving. He's been praising Ron DeSantis for about 2 years now. So we had that show where we talked about, 2 shows, I guess, where we actually talked about what should a journalism organization do. Well, now you get really in the gray area because Twitter will argue that they're not a news organization, right? They're a social media kind of thing. The problem is that news is conferred and conveyed with that. So anyway, Musk comes out. And so I'm kind of glad that, it went that way. But here's the spin factor, which this is why people have to go beyond just listening and really doing critical thinking. Twitter spun it the next day as so many people were interested in the topic we had that we couldn't handle it. Bullshit. You're right. You should be able to handle it. And Musk, the world's richest man, as you pointed out, since he's taken over Twitter, hold on, I just want to see. I think I have it here. I thought I did. Maybe I don't. Anyway, how much he paid? I think it was 55 billion or not. It was some incredible sum that he paid.
It was in the billions for Twitter. I forget the exact.
Yeah, and since that point, since he's taken over, which has been about a year, he's laid off 75% of the workers. Now, do you know any business that can handle losing 3/4 of their workers and not replacing them with anything else, right? I mean, obviously, every time I go into Target or, at Walmart or any store, grocery store now, we see more and more of the self-service, where you go through, which of course cuts down on jobs. So, I mean, there you could do it, but in this sense. So I think what we learned from that announcement and what followed is, number one, there's no question that Ron DeSantis, as a candidate for the Republican, become the Republican nominee for president of the United States, is going to be to the right of Donald Trump. No question. Now, Donald Trump was right enough for me, and right wing, obviously not correct. So you got DeSantis, who's running even to the right of him. And it will be fascinating, and it would actually be interesting if the outcome were not so important to America, to watch Trump and DeSantis go at it for the next few months. Now, despite these glitches, DeSantis had a phenomenal day the next day, millions of dollars poured in. Trump gets indicted, millions of dollars pour in, right? And so the problem becomes that as media give these people a platform, and they should be able to do it. They should be able to have it, a platform, not necessarily any specific platform. That now becomes political, right? I mean, there's no question. Twitter is now in Ron DeSantis' pocket, not in the old way of, quid pro quid money exchange, but Musk and DeSantis have formed a mutual admiration society. Musk obviously believing that DeSantis has a better chance of winning than Trump. I assume he wouldn't back a loser, or who would think it was a loser. But Donald Trump is definitely a formidable candidate, right? He beat Hillary Clinton. He shouldn't have, but he did. And I know, Brian, you said before, well, what about, the Russian influence? What about vote? I mean, I still think if you subtracted all that, the biggest thing, I think, besides Hillary's negative numbers and the fact that people didn't like her, I think Comey and the FBI coming out with that stupid ass report,
right? It
confused people. And that's another thing too. These reports that come out, we've got it coming out all the time, and unless you read the entire report, and some of them are 4,000 pages long, so who has time to do that? You're just getting somebody's condensed version of it. But since Anthony, I think, put it up with Amanda, the other thing is that part of the fire back now for banning Amanda's book is the fact that she's black and she's a woman, right? So you've got just the general idea of banning for the idea. Then you've got the idea of black, which leads me to something. I wasn't aware of this, and maybe you were, Brian. I wasn't. This week, something else happened in Florida. Now think about this for a moment. The NAACP, right, still the largest, most influential organization for African Americans, cautions Black Americans about traveling to hostile Florida.
Right.
Wow. So what does that mean? Well, it means this is what the NAACP said. Before traveling to Florida, please understand that the state of Florida devalues and marginalizes the contributors of and the challenges faced by African Americans and other communities of color. Now, what are they basing that on? Well, a few things. One is, of course, the book bans, like Amanda's, right? Another one is that DeSantis says he didn't, but he did. They have changes, like they rejected and had the AP rewrite it, which I find they're just whores anyway, college boards. But rewrite the African American AP curriculum. What? Look, let's face it. America, two things are true about African Americans, many, but two things that are true. Number one, white America has treated Black America as shit, from slavery to Jim Crow to today, to fighting affirmative action today. That's number one. And number two, America is not America without the contributions of Black America.
Correct.
Many of them not voluntary. I mean, the White House was built by slaves.
The war efforts, everything, the building of the country, the building of the White House.
That's what I said. All this stuff. So to suddenly, it's almost as if the white Republicans have this idea that if we don't talk about it, well, one of two things. One is if we don't talk about it, it's as if it never happened, or a belief that it never happened. Well, no, it did happen. And therefore, I think you need to, you need that. And I think too, again, I'm going to return to 1923, and I'm not shilling for that or Yellowstone, but I will say this. If you watch that one episode, just one episode of that show, I think you begin to see the treatment of whites toward Native Americans. And I would submit that as poorly as we've treated African Americans, and we've treated them very poorly, we did an even worse job with the Native Americans. That was genocide. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. When you start putting blankets with scarlet fever and other diseases in to a village, when you start massacring whole villages, when you start moving people like the Trail of Tears, unfortunately, I think Native Americans do not have the numbers, right? Because we kind of destroyed them to really have their voices heard, and we put them on reservations. What are reservations? Really, they're concentration camps. Really, they are. Right. Come on. Glorified. Concentration camp literally means a concentrated area where people of one kind are put. So we're back to Florida now. So we've got Florida. DeSantis is at war. With the African American community. He certainly is at war with Disney. That's a battle that's interesting.
But she's losing right now, apparently.
Well,
the question is, where does Disney go?
Well, that's the idea. Let's get real. They did cancel. What was it? I think they were bringing in 5,000 worker site, and they said we're not going to do that now. But really, where do they put it? Here's another thing that our listenership, viewership probably wouldn't know, but since we're in Cumberland County, the next county over from where Brian lives now and I lived then in Jersey, one of the nearby counties is Atlantic County, and they have a community there, Buena Vista. That is the name of it. Town Buena, and then Buena Vista is a community. And about every 10 years, or maybe every 8 to 10 years, a story would circulate that Disney was coming there, right? And the reason is Buena Vista is one of their taglines. That's, Buena Vista Productions is one of their taglines. So people get this report, but they're not. And my point is, you said it, really, where do you go to get the climate conditions, or the weather conditions, I should say, other than Florida? You're going to move to Texas? I don't know.
California is the only place where they already have Anaheim. So what do you
But
do?
and the thing with California, if anybody's ever been to Disneyland, and we have a couple of times, it is landlocked. I mean, it is tiny.
Right.
It's tiny compared to anything, let alone the expansion area that Disney still has in Florida, right? And of course, Orlando. DeSantis isn't worried about Disney so much. He just wants the reputation. But I think he knows too that a lot of that is just show. He challenges them, and then they'll win one. He'll back
Right, but he
one out.
must have done some political calculation, Dave, where he thought, okay, I know this is going to happen. I'm going to have a backlash from Disney. They may even cut some jobs. But because I'm stating this nationally, it's going to say, okay, I want to have this country change.
Ron DeSantis, after he won, well, probably even before. Let me do it this way. We have a new Republican governor, Youngkin, in Virginia, right? And from his very first day, it was clear that he was going to govern the state of Virginia in such a way that it would benefit him for run for president. That's exactly how he was going to do it, right? Exactly how he was going to. DeSantis, I don't know if he did it from his first election, but certainly when he got reelected, every move is calculated, like you said, Brian. Every move is calculated. So he's not really interested. I mean, I would argue this with anyone down there. He's not really interested in Florida. He's interested in how it plays across the rest of the country.
Right.
And what I think he was trying to do is prove that he would stand up to anybody, right? Because Disney, when you think of Florida, right, what company do you think of? Disney, right? I mean, that's
But isn't
Disney,
it
Florida.
ironic that somebody from the Republican Party, already they're essentially against the police when they went against the FBI. Now they're going against big business. But they're getting away with it in both instances because they pick and choose where you can be anti-capitalistic or anti-police.
Exactly. And it would be interesting to see, and you could do this, somebody, I'm not going to, but it was interesting to see the Republican platform. And don't go back to Eisenhower because that was a whole different era, right? Even Nixon. But let's go with Reagan. I consider that the beginning. Reagan's, although things were set up during Nixon's presidency, really Reagan's presidency is when the new Republican, right, started moving.
Again, and it got tied in with the religious right, too.
Yeah. And, well, I mean, Nixon, of course, had the Southern strategy. And that was where you saw the Democrats, the Democrats were in the South and they moved to Republicans.
They switched.
And then Reagan comes along. But he, certainly, I know three things that I always associated with the Republican Party was they were the party of big business. And as you say, they're not now. Some things they always were. They were always the party of guns. I mean, that's not
international trade too. When we say business,
right? They were very, and these things now that they're opposed to, or as you say, selectively pick and choose. They were the hardliners in the Cold War, right, against communism,
right?
And Trump certainly proved that didn't seem to be a problem. Donald Trump is so psychologically flawed that, my God, you could write 1,000 textbooks on him. But I think one of the most interesting things is why he, really acted as he did with Rocket Man in North Korea, or as he did with Putin. And I think the thing is that it's only about him in power. And he was, I don't want to say jealous, that's not the right word, but he couldn't understand why America couldn't be North Korea, or he didn't understand why America could not be Russia. And
he tried it too. I mean, January 6th is your invitation.
And so now, ladies and gentlemen, let's get real bleak. And again, I would entertain anyone else's thoughts on this, but I don't see any candidate emerging other than Trump or DeSantis from the Republican Party. I don't see anything else viable. Do you, Brian, at this point?
Well, Nikki Haley's a nobody. I mean, no, there isn't anybody right now. It's down to DeSantis, unless Christie gets in, but that's
no. Christie will get his ass handed.
Right. So you basically have DeSantis and you have Trump. Now there is going to be some degree of cannibalization because Trump knows to be able to get to the point where he can run for president against a Democrat, he's got to win with in his own party. So he's got to attack, and he's got to do it quickly.
And so what
he's
you
doing
have is, and they're doing it right back and forth, right? And of course they're distorting. I mean, like the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. Well, not necessarily with DeSantis and Trump, because they're both bad. If Donald Trump wins the presidency, it will be the first presidency in the history of the United States that's solely motivated by vengeance. He's just going to come after everybody he thought screwed him the first time. I mean, that's what he's going to do.
And he's going to pardon everybody from January 6th.
And he's going to pardon everybody from January 6th correctly. If you get DeSantis, and DeSantis is laying out his groundwork in Florida, if he wants the United States of America to resemble his Florida, then
he'll take over the schools first.
And it'll be authoritarian, right? So, do you have a I hate to label. I mean, I'm trying to think. See, I've never been able to make up my mind about Donald Trump. I don't know if he's crazy, sometimes cunning. I mean, he's amoral, if not immoral. We know that. He's all about himself. He is a classic narcissist.
I think that's the first place you go, Dave, is the narcissism is there. Forget about the politics. The narcissism is there. Okay.
And of course, people will argue, Republicans, or if they support Trump, will argue with some validity that you cannot be a politician and not have some part of narcissism in you. And I think there's some truth about that. You have to have an ego to run for office, or you have to have a cause that is so great. The danger with the narcissist is they begin to reflect on themselves, right, and do things for themselves. The danger with a cause is they're not really equipped to do the other things that need to be done, right? Because they have the cause, whether it's a good cause or a bad cause. Another disturbing trend that I would urge everybody to look at, especially in their own communities, for the first time in my lifetime that I know of, the number of school board candidates being endorsed by a political party are growing.
Wow. You think they go that far, a local school board vote, and you're going to have some congressman or woman to endorse that candidate?
Correct. And that's happening
it's happening that is vicious.
And so now, you always had the thing of like one issue could drive, somebody would come out or they're against this or they're against that.
But isn't that the Republican playbook to just get it at the roots, that they want to win at the roots up?
If you're talking about it as a battle or a war, the Republicans were smart. They really were. They did not worry so much about the national ticket initially. They worried about the local races. And that's where their establishment comes because, take Jimmy Carter, for example. Jimmy Carter started as a member of the zoning board in Plains, Georgia. So, that's where Republicans really built their strength. And now suddenly they really do have right now, we're not going to see them. They have a stronger playing field, or a stronger candidate field, I should say, for the presidents than the Democrats do. Even if you open it up, even if you open the Democratic candidates up, Republicans still are stronger in terms of the support they would get from their party. Anthony, yeah. I mean, I'm not arguing with you. I'm going to go with Brian. I think he's a psychopath does not have to be a narcissist. A narcissist does not have to be a psychopath. But since Donald Trump is the biggest narcissist, it mirrors a psychopath. You know what I mean? Because a psychopath has no empathy or anything for people. A narcissist has no empathy. The difference is, I think, in one sense, the psychopath, fulfills desires in one way. A narcissist just says, "I'm the best. I'm the greatest." Here we go. Let's see. Let's get must means everyone at all companies go back to work at offices. He needs commuters to sell cars. Certainly, you couldn't argue with that. That's another thing that will be interesting. I wonder, Brian. Well, Mr. Silly Wonka is not so silly there, as he raises an interesting point. Could you see that? And I don't want to influence you. Can you see that becoming a campaign issue at some point? Should workers go back to work, or should they be able to work from home? Again, if you're going to exploit divisions, right? Or if you're going to side with people with money, which businesses have, we don't see it now.
I still think that the major winner for the Republican Party is the immigration issue. That's what helped them in 2016.
No question.
I mean, if there's any one, that's it. The immigration issue.
And
because you can't have 12,000 people a day coming over border and think that the country's going to just allow that to happen.
But do you? I mean, I'm not down at the border. All I've seen is what's shown or what's written. I mean, I don't see. I don't see the Mexican invasion. I mean, I just don't see it.
Well, they're not necessarily Mexican now. It's coming from other countries like Guatemala and El Salvador, things like that. But they are getting sent back in many cases. But it doesn't look good. You do have to have some control of your borders.
Well, I understand that, but also, who's going to do the work that the immigrants do? I mean,
that is another issue, and then we've talked about this before. I mean, look, if the Republicans really wanted to stop, the problem with the border, they would just simply say you've got to have a legitimate Social Security number. Or you don't work, so that way they wouldn't get any work. They could.
They're not going to do.
And they're not going to do that. No, they're not going to do that at all. So it's a mess. But I think there are even many Democrats who don't want what's happening at the borders.
But
because this is only going to continue. It's happening. You're seeing it happening in areas in Southern Europe. A lot of this is climate change too. We don't think of it that way, but the heat is so great. And people can't find work. It's nasty, and they're coming north.
Now, again, I haven't been to that many Latin American countries, but I've been to a few. And what you find down there is certainly anti-democracies, for the most part, right? Now, Costa Rica somehow has been able to maintain the Switzerland of Latin America. But take Costa Rica out of the equation. Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador.
Dominican, these drug cartels everywhere. It's really tough to live down there.
Wouldn't you want to get the fuck out, right?
Absolutely. And there's only one route right now, and that's to the United States or Mexico. Mexico is not a picnic.
And then as you limit immigration, the other problem becomes there's a large swath of the Republican Party that wants no immigrants. Two problems with that. The biggest being that we can't do the things we need to do at the low level without immigrants. Right? But also we can't do the things without the high level of immigrants, right? We don't have enough doctors. We don't have enough anything. Professors. We need the best and the brightest to come here. So some of them will come from America, of course.
And many are. I mean, that's happened for the most part, people from India, from the former Soviet Union, other places in Eastern Europe. We have gotten many of the best people.
And the trick is to entice them to come. And certainly being viewed as anti-immigrant, which Donald Trump and that version of the Republican Party
No doubt about it.
Is not a good welcoming. All
I'm saying, Dave, is that there has to be something done about the massive flow at the border. And it's got to be done in a more efficient manner. And I think everybody agrees with that. It cannot continue the way it's going. I mean, you even see when they do send up these immigrants to New York and whatever, the cities of New York is trying to, shove them somewhere in the outskirts.
They bring the buses up to DC too, any big city, and of course that's absurd. That's just a political stunt on behalf of Texas.
Absolutely, but they're making a point, and they're winning that point because they're saying, hey, look at these people in the rich areas in the Hamptons. They don't want those people either.
Well, no, I'm going to dispute you there. They do want some of those people to be their servants and cut their grass, but they don't want them to do anything else. Or where do they think they came from?
I am in a district where we have that happen. We have so many students who don't even speak English, in our classes. We have that more than almost any place in New Jersey, right here in Bridgeton. In fact, in many parts of Bridgeton, it's called Little Mexico, even though it's not just people from Mexico.
Right. But the last statistic I saw was interesting. When my niece, who no longer teaches in the Bridgeton system, she's an administrator in the Buna system now. When she came, she was in the preschool, right? And that would have been I've been out 12 years, so maybe she was there 17 years ago. I'm fishing here, 16, 17 years ago. The preschool was 78% Hispanic. The Bridgeton preschool, once an African American town. Now, that number was a little inflated because there are preschools that are not part of the Bridgeton district, the school district itself that you can go to, Little Red Hen, some other ones that people would send to. But last I saw, the high school, and you might have a better handle on the statistic. I saw 76% of the school was Hispanic now in the high school, which supports this growth. And you might think, well, that's only Bridgeton, but you're finding it all over, and you're certainly finding in areas where the jobs available are not the best, right? So the slaughterhouses in the Midwest,
and you're right, and they're hiring, teenage kids for these slaughterhouses, and they're getting away with it because a lot of the governors are pressing to go back to the standards of 1910, where you can get these young kids and they work in awful conditions, and this is. They say this is the party who says we don't want them here, and then at the next moment they're saying, "Come on, work in the slaughterhouse," and we're going to get away with it because the child labor laws don't mean anything to us anymore.
And again, I've mentioned this time and again, but every once in a while we get a new viewer, a new listener, and I just think it bears repeating. When Donald Trump, remember, came out with the Mexican rapist remark, right, which was really the time I think when he realized being on the dark side of the force was going to be okay for him. At the time, he was restoring the old post office in Washington, D.C. into his Trump International Hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue. And again, I can't say how many. I'm going to say more than 25 times, but not 50. I would walk by there during the construction because I worked on Pennsylvania Avenue. And every single worker I saw, Brian, now, these are outside workers. Every single worker I saw was Hispanic or Latino. Now, here in Crystal City, along with the two neighboring communities, they formed this thing, National Landing. Amazon is going to be the Amazon headquarters where I can walk to it. Again, I'm going to hazard. I suppose I might be off on this, but I'd be pretty comfortable. I wouldn't be off by much. I'd say 85% of the workers doing the construction work are Hispanic or Latino.
Yes.
Okay. So it really becomes, you're right. I mean, you don't want your borders overrun, but we need regulations.
There has to be some type of processing so that everybody can be accounted for. You let them in, but you do it in a way that there's some kind of organization, that no one area gets too crowded. You maybe place them in areas where it's a mess. And not only that, you still have to work with what's going on in Central America. Again, part of it's the climate change thing that is not. It's right. Not just the drugs. It's some of it's climate change. And if it isn't climate change, it's going to be climate change fairly soon. It's going to get so bad.
Well, and there again, with the Republicans, climate change doesn't exist to them.
Right. It doesn't exist. But so I'll tell you what, though, when they want to get their FEMA checks, they will certainly get that when the storms, destroy the Outer Banks.
Well, that's God's will, or that's not climate change. They will come up with that idea.
Well, again, that goes back to that whole thing about the uninformed mind. I mean, and that plays in it. I mean, they know the truth. I mean, Putin probably knows the truth. I mean, he's the king of fossil fuels, so he's not going to give in to this idea that this is a man-made event. It's a danger for Russia. It's the same thing here. They know it's the truth, but they're willing, unless they actually don't believe that it's true, which is hard to believe.
Well, I think there might be a handful of them that believe anything that happens is God's will. There's a handful, all right? Whatever happens, it's God's will.
Look, and again, let's stop right there for a second, if you don't mind. You're saying they believe that this is God's will. Now, again, it sounds like I'm coming about it as an atheist, but try to take, if you're out there and you think, well, Brian's just talking like an atheist, But just take yourself out of that idea for a second and just say, okay, look where we are in terms of this century, where we've come from. Look at life as it was 200 years ago, 300 years ago. We've seen the progression. Things have gotten better because of technology. We have a better understanding of how the universe works. And here we are in 2023, and you're saying that we do have these people who have no trust. Basically, what you're saying is they don't trust science.
Well,
they don't trust Fauci. They don't trust climate change. Whatever Peter Wadhams. First of all, they wouldn't even know who Peter Wadhams was. They don't believe in this stuff. And if you get one cold day, because climate change happens kind of slower than oh my God, next month it's going to be 150 degrees. It goes somewhat slowly in terms of human life. We know it's going quickly, of course, but for them, they don't see it quite. They're like the frog in the boiling pot. So they don't that type. That you're basically saying is we have monstrously stupid people who are authoritarians. And you've got the perfect combination of stupid and dangerous. You're handing the gun. It's just a metaphor. You're handing the gun to the idiot, and you don't know what the idiot's going to do with that gun. And that's essentially with that attitude. I'm not talking about you having an attitude, but I'm saying the attitude that they will believe this. These people will believe it. Then you really can't get out of it, Dave. Because again, you've handed them the gun. You've literally given Kyle Rittenhouse the gun, and you see what happens with that.
Right. Well,
and that's where our society has turned. I can't beat that, Dave. I can't punch through that stupidity.
Because also we become a society of immediacy and now. Now, I'm not saying, I don't know if human beings ever really understood the past enough to learn from it and, look ahead at the future and try in some way to make it better. So many people.
Again, whose past do they care about? But Dave, whose past do they actually care about?
None.
Right, because it's usually they only get concerned when they get the diagnosis. Everybody else could get the diagnosis of COVID or the disease, but until they get caught with the disease, then all of a sudden it matters. Right. And that's part of the problem too.
There's another issue that's going to be a political issue. It's already been raised since the announcement of DeSantis and Musk. DeSantis is trying to separate himself, from Trump. I mean, that's what you want to do. Why, he doesn't want to.
If he wants to win, and I'm assuming the very fact that he ran.
So one issue that he's picking up, you mentioned COVID. He's contrasting the fact that he kept his state open with Trump, who was horrible with COVID, but didn't order America to stay open, right? Because let's not praise Donald Trump. The one thing you will say is under his regime, the COVID shots, right? The idea was speeded up the process. Now that could have gone south too very easily if you took away the testing, right? And everybody got the shot, suddenly grew 6 heads or something. But I mean that didn't happen.
Well, I think Trump actually, in the beginning of COVID, he tried to hide it, but once it came out, he actually, I think, looked forward to it because it was a way of him exerting his power. Maybe I can solve this thing. But then when he couldn't solve it, then he started attacking his own.
Right. And you would think, you talk about, Brian, the idea of, you would have thought, there's no question that Donald Trump had COVID. I mean, that's not an issue of dispute. What is at issue, perhaps a little bit, is the severity of his COVID.
Well, he got a very good treatment from.
Well, and that's part of it. But also, they say he was a lot sicker than you let on, and you could certainly see that when he arrived back at the White House and was walking up to the balcony,
he's trying to catch his breath.
Yeah, so and so you take Florida, was an open state. Now, I'm not blaming Ron DeSantis for my sister-in-law's death, but she died from complications of COVID and lived in Florida. Now, was that because it was such an open state? It was after that. So in that case, no. But, the question becomes, it's an interesting point. Would you rather, if we get another crisis, whatever that crisis is, major, right? Yeah, I think that's part of it. I don't, I don't know, because I believe climate change is real. It's hard for me to understand how somebody can't believe it's real. What are the rationale? God's will might be what Veg says here. Too terrifying for them to acknowledge. If I put my head in the sand, it won't happen. The problem becomes that it is happening. And you mentioned before, like putting a gun to their head. Guns are another problem. What are you going to do about what are you going to do about that? I don't know. Like I said, I've given up on that. I'll still send my money to a couple of organizations that I believe are pretty good. There's being a journalist, there's a...
Well, then I think we've already answered the question. When will something be done? It's when we talk about the disease, when the disease is them. When some lunatic, some Kaczynski type, gets a hold of an AR-2015, whatever the hell you call them, and he kills all the children of such and such a congressman or a senator, then all of a sudden, it's boo-hoo. I don't think the Steve Scalise thing was enough to change people.
No, that's what I was just going to say. No, not enough, right? Because that wasn't, I don't know what would be enough. I really don't know what would be enough. Do you really think Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to change her opinions of guns? Lauren Boebert, who has her 4 kids holding guns for their Christmas card? No. And the other thing is that I got to explore. I'm giving myself a job and I don't really want to, but I want to know, Brian, what the hell happened to the NRA? Not what happened to it. Why the hell did it disappear? Right. Have you heard anything about the NRA?
Maybe it's a calculation that it's better if they just say nothing.
It might be that. Is it because they were, their organization fell apart because they were ripping each other off from the leadership? We don't know.
I have no idea. Whatever it is, they're going to do it in their best interest. So whatever the reasoning was, they're doing it in their best interest.
But a lot of that, became, the Republicans, they got to be guns because the NRA. But the NRA has certainly been emasculated. It's certainly not the organization it was 25 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe even.
But they don't need to be because all the politicians are still behind it. So it wouldn't matter.
That's what's happening. And that ties into immigration, right? I want my guns because of those people coming into my country.
Right.
It ties into, the fact that a lot of Republicans really think that Joe Biden, has a secret plot to ruin America, or not so secret plot to ruin America. So we've got to be ready. And I've said every time, that's just pure and unadulterated bullshit. You show me any organization in America that can stand up to the military when it comes to a battle. There isn't any. Okay.
Thankfully. But the problem is, and I keep saying this, is you have people like Michael Flynn who still has a brother within the military. You still have to be able to, but it's still better that we have control of the military.
Oh no, that's what I'm saying. That is good. But I'm just saying, if we ever lose that.
I found this on the web for People and Michael Flatley still has a brother for the military if you still have to be able, but still better that we have control of the military. Check it out.
Speaking of sexy, that was Alexa. That was Alexa.
That was Siri coming in on, I don't know what the hell. I don't know if it's my watch or I have no idea.
That happens all the time. Well, there's another thing that we should have to be concerned about. And when I say concerned about, I'm saying about who do you want to lead, a liberal or conservative? What about artificial intelligence? Right? Which is coming. It is coming.
As long as it's intelligence, that's all I care about.
Well,
I know where you're going to go with it, but I'm just saying, if I had to choose between a computer that's intelligent and can, rather than having Trump, would you rather vote for an intelligent design?
Here's the problem. Artificial intelligence will always have to have someone plugging it in. Make sense?
Until it's autonomous.
If it can,
right now it's true. Whatever you just said. I don't know. It have some self-sufficient,
But the point is,
drones to help them out.
There'll be a company, I'm just saying, and that's where the problem becomes to me is who's going to be in charge of it? Who's going to make the laws that either limit or continue it? Is there, and again, that's something, it's like climate change. If we do nothing, we're going to be destroyed. Technology, we need to be wise about it because it's like everything else. It can be a tremendous boon and has proven to be one already, right? But even with benefits, we spoke earlier, there are benefits in terms of movement with self-checkout, but it was jobs lost. And that's something else that I really think is something that nobody, I shouldn't say no one, think tanks are in a few colleges, but is just another hidden area. We're going to reach a point where a lot of jobs that we know now that employ people aren't going to be necessary. Just take two that we know. If we ever get to the point of self-driven vehicles, truck drivers, Uber drivers, cab drivers.
But Dave, we may not even
drivers.
need. I mean, I know. I had this discussion at the bank the other day, and I mentioned the horses in World War One, where 7 million horses died tragically, and of course, we don't even use horses anymore in wars,
Right.
at least not in the United States Army. And I understand what you're saying, and because this person at the bank said, "Well, I said we should go cashless." She said, "Well, I really wouldn't want that because people would lose some jobs." I said, "Yeah, I understand that, but at some point, we won't even need to have jobs if you have an automated society. There's no need for the automated society."
But you have to have something for the people to do. That's what I'm saying. I mean,
but they don't have to physically take the shovel and start working.
I didn't say that, but they have to have something to do. I mean, without that, and I don't think we're preparing for that. Like, what happened?
Well, there may at some point, Dave, if we're still around, not us, but if
Right.
the human race is still around 300 years, you're going to have robots doing the work.
No
And
question.
there's nothing wrong with that. It's the same thing
I'm
as
not-
having a lawnmower
I'm not-
doing it.
I'm not
With
saying there's
self-propelled.
anything, but you better start planning for it now.
It'll happen out of necessity. It always does happen. It happens.
But it would happen. Would you agree that it would happen better if you had a plan?
I'm not going to have a job just because somebody needs a job. Like, I'm not going to just create, a
say
horsewhipper because
Didn't say that. Do you go to a guaranteed income? Where there's a level and you get that and you live.
I don't know. I mean, that's come out already, but I mean, I assume that at that point with that type of society, they'll be, far more advanced than we are. They'll just know that you have to take care of certain needs, and the whole mentality is going to be different then. It's not even a question of, well, this person needs to work. You'll have to have ideas of how many people are you going to have, on this planet? How many can you support? Who decides, how many
There
children
you
can have?
Stop right there. That to me is the big question of human nature. Who decides? Does the Pope decide? Right? If we're talking about that,
Well, this is what W.E. Du Bois would say. This is what he said you had to have. I mean, you're not going to like this, perhaps, but I understand what he meant. You have a talented 10th, and it's not that he's trying to say, okay, nobody can make good decisions, but he's basically saying, yeah, look, there are people who know that 2 + 2 = 4, and I'm just using the metaphor,
right.
that to have things work the best. Du Bois knew that. I mean, Du Bois isn't the only one, but it made a point because you're trying to get things done that are right and most efficient. So I know what you're saying. Well, who decides that? I mean, it certainly isn't Donald Trump, and it certainly isn't the Republican Party. But we have to get to the point where you can say, okay, we have these really intelligent people who have no.
I would take a little bit of issue with that because when I hear intelligence, I think of IQ. I mean, that's kind of we all do, right? We know the IQ tests are meaningless, but we still think that. I kind of like, which is, when I say it's a relatively new term. It's been around 3 or 4 decades, I guess. EQ, which is emotional. Your emotional IQ, right? I would much rather have a person emotionally adjusted than I would, someone with a high IQ. I think that's more important. And that's what I think we're losing politically, too, is the fact that, a lack of empathy. Certainly Trump has no empathy. DeSantis doesn't seem to have any empathy, right? Joe Biden, I think, has empathy. I really do. He has a lot of flaws, but I think in general, he still kind of has some of that hard scrabble, Scranton, roots that his family imparted there. The other player, I mean, if something happens to Biden, we've talked about that before. It's just speculative. I'm even kind of tired of speculating, but I think you'd have to say, it would be kind of Kamala's to lose, right? Kamala's to lose. Well, Anthony, there are people who believe that could be starting on June 5th. So we'll see. That is I haven't read yet anywhere where they say, but I mean, they could extend the deadline if they wanted to. It doesn't help any. But June 5th is the due date, the come to Jesus moment for this economy. Judy, that's what I was kind of saying. Mentally healthy, emotionally healthy, empathy, I think goes a long way. If you want to ask me, do I want a religious person or do I want a humanist? I'm going to take a humanist every single time. Because, that's what we are. We're human. And again, we return to sex, which, was kind of the beginning of the story, beginning of the show. And of course, that's an interesting thing. And people then mistake that. The scandal about Donald Trump and sex was not about who he had sex with, right?
Right.
There were two issues. One is, did he force sex on people? And there's a civil suit that indicates he does, right?
Right.
And secondly, did he pay to hush up sexual activity? And there's certainly proof that he did. And the question becomes, where did that money come from? And did that in any way compromise the integrity of the position he held? Now, this week, actually late last week, this week, there are reports out that his own attorneys are saying now, you're going to get indicted. Now, whether that's true or not, we don't know. But I think there was enough, and that would be indicted in the other cases, that are there. And then we're back to every show. We have to kind of say to it. Again, I'd like to know every show. Please understand, and many people stay with us the whole time, but please understand that an indictment, even an imprisonment, does not stop Donald Trump from running for president. Doesn't stop him. So anybody who was hoping for that, that's a false hope. It would take an act of Congress to change the laws. Well, it might even take, I said that quickly. It might even take a change in the Constitution, because the Constitution mentions that, what you have to be president. And as we said, it's over 35, native born American and living in America for 15 years. And as long as you meet those qualifications, you can run for president, which is another big factor, I think, Brian, facing the country, that we have to figure out a way to do it. How are you going to get ethics into the Supreme Court when they have no oversight? How are you? I don't know. They're not going to do it themselves. Roberts is not going to police the court, nor can he. There's no question.
He wouldn't do it anyway.
There's no question that if Clarence Thomas were governor, a senator, a congressman, doing what he's done, there would certainly be questions raised.
Or if he were a Democrat.
Oh, well, absolutely.
It's
now, the last thing, and I think we'll go out with this too. I'm going to go out with this, is I've been following this a lot. Of course, June is Pride Month, right? And basically, distilled down, it's a time to both recognize and celebrate gay Americans, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. And what is it? Their own saying, we're here, we're queer, get used to it. Certainly nothing new. I don't know statistically if it's growing, because so much prior to you can actually say prior to 1969 Stonewall, it was pretty much kept in the closet, right? People were, the idea was, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But now, we talk about businesses. Have you been following that Target story at all? I find it very interesting.
Which
they came out, Target, about Pride Month. So Target, what they were going to do.
All right, didn't they cave in?
What they were doing was they had a backlash. They had some products geared with signs, to the gay community, which was fine. Then there was the complaints, and they immediately backed down. Now, the same thing happened, and I hate to do this. I should have looked it up. I want to say it's the Dodgers. I think it's an LA team where they're going to have a night like that, and they backed out. Now, remember we said Amanda Gordon, one person,
Right.
not even filling out the form right. 'Cause at what point, Bud Light, their trans program, that's, Kid Rock fired a couple shots into some beer cans, and suddenly, that's not there. So the question becomes, who is going to represent America in terms of what it looks like, what its sexuality is? And certainly, again, it comes back, as that show does every time, is who do you want determining every single issue facing America? Do you want Democrats who tend to be liberal, or do you want Republicans who are conservative and, even worse now, run by a radical right-wing, fascist, authoritarian, belief? Do you want your schools run by school boards and school administrators, or do you want them run by the Bible? Do you believe, that the Pope, which we talked about today, is infallible and we'll wait for him to make the decision? And of course, we can say, with all honesty, we can't say that there will never be a female president. I think there will. It has to be almost. But there's never going to be a female Pope, right?
Yeah.
Can't. And so already you have, this male-dominated, still in control, although they're African, Catholics and Latin Catholics, still dominated by Eastern European, white Europeans. And, you like when I go to bed at night, I mean, I don't think about it all the time, but I don't worry about it, but I just don't like the America where we're headed in terms of, for my grandchildren. I really don't. I think they will be fine in this sense because they're very smart. They're certainly a lot closer to the 1% than they are to the lower end of the middle. But but even there, if the world is in a good place, why, it's not going to be good for even the wealthy. And you're talking about when the coasts can't be inhabited, right? Which they can't because the water will come there first. Where are these people going to go? And you said Europe is an example. They're having a horrible time now, especially in areas that were always white. Scandinavian countries are really having a hard time with that now. Germany, France, I mean, all of Europe, with the idea of immigration and movement. And then on top of that, you have the idea as more movement, as the world becomes smaller, and it does every single day, you have more chance of a pandemic, right? I mean, certainly something that happens tonight in Africa can be here there's no place in the world that you cannot be from point A to point B in 24 hours.
Right.
So what I hear you saying is you really are torn between supporting Ron DeSantis, Elon Musk, or Donald Trump for president. So which one are you going to take? Now, let's make a joke. Let's say that. Right now, let's make them the three candidates. One of them has to be president. Which one do you choose?
Well, I would choose the one most likely to have a heart attack, so I guess that'd be Trump.
I wasn't even saying heart attack. I mean, I think, Musk completely, just, I don't even, he's not even human. DeSantis is too calculating, and Trump. Yeah, Judy, that's interesting. You really, it's almost an oxymoron sometimes to think about liberal, wealthy people. You don't really think of them, right, Brian? I mean, I don't. I mean, there are, but a lot of them, I think, are actually tied into the arts, and the entertainment business. And you have to be somewhat careful there, most people think, of alienating, your whole audience. Throw a couple comments up. We'll go out with those. Throw a couple comments up that even we have, so we can talk to them a couple minutes before we go out. Yeah, exactly. Okay, guns. And Mr. Wonka, I'm not questioning you. I don't see us making any nationwide movement to do any damn things about guns. That's exactly right, Judy. Minority. I was thinking about that today. It's interesting you should bring that up. It really is a minority is really running the country. I mean, the Republicans are a minority, and the part of the Republican Party that's running their party is a minority of the Republicans. They will stop thinking because it's just too hard. Certainly, we need some science fiction writers to tell us what that is. Oh, really? Is that? I assume that's for the
I don't know, but I mean, it sounds like it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know they said they were close at one point, but close and signed are two different things. So I'm not certainly that would be. Yep, of course. That's and that even that moment in California when the Black Panthers came armed to the State House. Within a couple months, there were gun restrictions. Chris Rock had a little different thing. He said charge $10,000 a bullet, and guns. Well, I mean, it's kind of a funny way of thinking about it. Seems to be teetering on the brink, hemorrhaging both money and support. Certainly, Anthony, if diet has anything to do with it and lack of exercise, I'm sure he's not in the best shape. But you know what he did? He actually hired, literally, a physician in the White House who lied for him and said he was. Actually came out with the mark. He said, well, the most fit president in the history of America? I don't think so. Anne Frank's stepsister in a January essay to mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day accused, go back to that one before, Brian, just the one before. I didn't see that one when it came up. Can you go back? Accused Trump of acting like another Hitler. There were a lot of people saying that. I kind of changed mine to this thing. Anthony, this is kind of what I came up with in Trump. Trump isn't Hitler, but neither was Hitler until Hitler became Hitler. If you follow what I'm saying, I mean, the comparison. Certainly, he was certainly on the path toward fascism, on the path toward authoritarianism. He certainly established some camps in the border that reminded us of what was done. Warren Buffett, yep, that would be. I'm sure. Again, probably some people in the entertainment industry. Oprah Winfrey, right? I don't know if she's a billionaire, but she's up there. And did you see that week? Speaking of Oprah, before we go, another report surfaced, and I don't know how much speculation was, that for Dianne Feinstein's position, which again, Dianne, please retire, please leave, please.
No, we don't want another.
No.
What's her name?
Ruth Bader
Ginsburg.
And again, and we even did almost a whole show on age, and does there come a point? But she is incapable of doing her job. I mean, that is clear. So please, Diane, go. A name that was circulated again, and I don't think she was a California resident, but Oprah Winfrey. Is she? I mean, I don't know if anybody out there knows. I don't know why I thought. I know she was from Chicago originally, I think, but maybe she does live out there now. Musk says the world needs more people as he seeks to robotize all his plans. Each new plan has robots doing more specific jobs. That's that's everywhere. We ain't got time to do things about guns. Too many books are making kids gay. Yeah, Jeff. That's it. I want to say about that for a minute. Let's all stop for a minute. And I know we know it, but just refresh our minds. How fucking absurd is that? That a book could make you gay? Really? I mean, really, it can't. It doesn't make you gay. It might explain, some of the stuff, or give you. I think there are a lot of people who wants to be Trump's running mate. Judy, I think Tim Scott is one. I don't think he can seriously think he could be president. The only thing I know about the vice president is I don't think it'll be Pence. I don't think anybody's going to take Pence. What else we got? Anything else?
She's talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I assume Judy's talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Or Dianne Feinstein. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. What am I talking about? Dianne.
I know.
I'm sorry.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I just kind of lost it there. So, listen, David, it's getting late.
It is there. It's the witching hour almost.
Yeah, we hit 2 hours, and I apologize to everybody. At the beginning, when we went on, I was messing with the controls, and I got it right, and then I went on my phone to check to see if it was on YouTube, but then my AirPods went to this instead of what you're watching now, and then I had to restart it. So I'll probably delete that first 3 minutes, and then
no.
Just leave it up there.
That stands. As I said, I'll end the show with what I began.
On me.
You are the Elon Musk of divided.
All right, I'll let it stand. Well, that means that then maybe we did tie the record. I had 2 videos tonight. Remember I said head in the box we had 172. I thought tonight we were 1 away. Well, apparently if I leave both videos, I'll have to label that one 172, and we'll tie the record tonight. Okay. But and David and I are planning on uploading a recorded show, we tend to do a lot better with numbers on that. As much as we're not monetized, we do like the numbers. And one of our videos got close to 1,000 views a few days ago, and then one about 300. So being uploaded during the day does seem to help, depending on the days that you do it,
Do,
the
do, you,
time that you do it.
do you think the fact that almost 1,000 views you did that nude had anything to do with that, or
Oh,
you know, think,
absolutely, absolutely, 1,000 views. But but anyway, yeah, we're gonna do that, and it's a whole different concept because you do have a little bit of time to prepare. Although, you know, David and I are kind of the same when we play music, and we're the same when we were the same when we taught. Now I still teach, but David and I both like spontaneity, and our mantra is that we have the past, what we've learned in the past, that we should be able to attack any issue. And come on, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be prepared. It's just that you can't say to yourself, well, if I just have 2 days of preparation, I should be able to put together a good show. But we generally have an outline of what the topic's going to be about, and then we go with it, because there's always something at some point in time during the show that either one of us will be able to add, and it's just the way we operate. So the live format is more friendly for Dave and for me, but we are experimenting with the uploading of a recorded thing. So if you take the time to check it out, please do so, because the shows aren't too much different, but there is not that dialogue that we have with the audience. But you should
and
perhaps
the
check it
other
out.
difference is, Brian, it's one subject. I mean, we
It's
might
one, so
stray a
right.
little bit from, but it's
Right.
not like this where you can multiple strains.
We
And since
go
it,
off, and this is
and
and
so
this is essentially improvisation. This is what you do
yeah,
when you improvise. And
exactly.
that it's just something that and I mentioned that to my wife the other day, and it goes back to when David and I played music. Is that we may not have both like the same exact type of music, but the way we approach music was the same, and we were always the same in that sense. And so that's
But
why
Brian,
whenever good.
but Brian, when you say it was the same with music as this show, whenever there's a disagreement between the two of us, I'm always right. So if I liked a song and you didn't, I was right.
I'll give
Vice
you
versa.
this. Like in music and like the show, Dave will always say that he thinks he's right, even if he's not right, but he will make the statement that he's right. Sometimes he is right. Now, last week he was right. I screwed up with the audio. So that's good. But no, and Dave knows this is true. That's why we're good friends. I mean, we both taught almost exactly the same way, and
True.
there wasn't any manual for the way that we taught. We could only be effective teaching the way we did. If Dave had a set of cue cards, or if I had a set of cue cards, we could do it, but it would be just against the grain to do something like that. So this is the way that we do it, and it's not better, it's not worse. It's just the way we feel comfortable. But we are doing some recorded versions, and we're just trying to figure out, why is it that 10 times as many people watch the recorded version rather than the live version. And yet there's probably more going on in the live show than the recorded show. So it's fascinating. Maybe, Dave has just got to go on a skateboard or something to get 1 million views or something like that. And yeah, it's I'll never figure it out. I'll never figure it out. But maybe I don't know, David, I don't know what you're doing on Monday, but maybe Monday
Give me a call.
and I'll give you a
My,
call.
yeah.
And I want to thank everybody for showing up. And there's always one or two people. I always notice we get usually a subscriber or so after each show, maybe two. So if you're out there, I know a lot of you are incognito as usual, and that's fine. But if you had a nice evening with us, we'd appreciate if you would subscribe. And we're not asking for anything except your subscription to our channel, and we can talk. Even if you are a Republican. I don't know if we have any Republican subscribers, Dave, but you don't know. I think we have 164 subscribers, so maybe we'll have 165 tonight. Somebody will be nice enough to subscribe. Well, Dave, thank you very much. Dave, as usual, I'm going to sign off and close it out, so I won't be able to talk to you. Yeah. Oh, good. We have 10 thumbs up and 1 thumbs down, Dave. So There you go. But it doesn't matter. As long as you have a thumb up or down, it helps us. So thank you, everybody. All right, have a great night, and we'll see you next time as we finish.